with them. We know Canadians want to help, and we're ready to match that help. The federal government will match donations you make to the humanitarian coalition up to $3 million until September 28th. These funds will help provide life-saving services to those in need. We are also allocating an additional $25 million in urgent humanitarian funding and longer-term development assistance to help with recovery and rebuilding. This is, of course, in addition to the over $5 million we've already committed to help the millions of people in Pakistan who are dealing with this horrific climate disaster, and we will continue to look at other ways we can help. This week, Caucus is meeting here in St. Andrews by the Sea to talk about the important issues facing Canadians, like the cost of living. On a eu des bonnes discussions à propos de l'économie, des soins de santé, de l'environnement et d'autres enjeux importants qui préoccupent les gens. Et notre objectif en tant que gouvernement est très clair, c'est d'obtenir des résultats pour les Canadiens. Global inflation, caused by COVID-19 and Putin's invasion of Ukraine, has made cost of living a real challenge for lots of people. All summer, members of Liberal Caucus have been talking to Canadians, listening to people's worries about their future, about how difficult it is to make ends meet right now. And our government has been hard at work on a plan that will deliver relief to millions of Canadians. We've already delivered on childcare. We've delivered an increasing Canada Child benefit. We continue to step up in a range of ways. But today, we're announcing additional targeted new measures that will support the middle class and people working hard to join it. These will be the very first pieces of legislation that we introduce when the House returns. The first element of our plan is to deliver relief to millions of Canadians by doubling the GST tax credit for 6 months. This will provide hundreds of dollars of support to Canadians, including half of all families and more than half of all seniors in the country. For example, parents with 2 kids could receive up to an extra $467 this fall to help with the cost of living. Second, as promised earlier this year, we're moving forward on dental care. Avec notre plan pour les soins dentaires, les familles avec des enfants de moins de 12 ans pourraient commencer à recevoir des versements directs pour les frais dentaires au cours des 2 prochaines années pour un total allant jusqu'à $1,300 par enfant. This is the first step outlined in the Supply and Confidence Agreement to develop a national dental care program. We aim to have that program started for those under 18, persons with disabilities, and seniors by the end of 2023, with the full program completed by 2025. Thirdly, the federal government will also provide a one-time $500 top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit Program. People who currently receive hundreds of dollars in housing benefits each month through the program we introduced and co-fund with provinces and territories can also apply to receive this additional support. On top of that, this federal top-up would reach hundreds of thousands more low-income renters, with around 1.8 million Canadians eligible for it. This support is in addition to our comprehensive housing plan that you've heard me talk a lot about these past months. Last week, our government announced a historic partnership with First Nations in BC that will create nearly 3,000 homes as a first step on their way to 6,000 homes in the coming years in Vancouver. In the budget, we laid out a plan how we'll help you save for your first home with a tax-free savings account and also crack down on speculation. And earlier this month, we announced funding to rapidly build thousands of affordable units right across the country while we pilot a new rent-to-own program in addition. All of this builds on other actions our government is taking to make life more affordable for everyone. Things like our childcare plan, which is already saving some families hundreds of dollars a month and will continue to have a meaningful impact in families right across the country as we reduce childcare fees by 50% from coast to coast to coast. Or the 10% increase in old age security that seniors over 75 received this past summer. Nos autres mesures déjà prises pour aider avec le coût de la vie comptent aussi, comme la bonification de l'allocation canadienne pour les travailleurs, qui a donné des centaines, voire des milliers de dollars en soutien à des travailleurs quand ils ont fait leur déclaration de revenus cette année, et on augmente des prestations comme l'allocation canadienne pour enfants ou le régime des pensions du Canada pour suivre l'inflation. These measures all put people at the center of our plan to grow the economy. They are targeted to the middle class and people working hard to join it while we continue to be responsible with public finances. We are retaining fiscal firepower and, at the same time, ensuring that those who need support don't get left behind. The help we're announcing today will make a big difference for the people who get it in a targeted way that will not stoke inflation. Above all, we will keep growing the economy, creating good jobs for people, and making sure that Canadians are at the center of everything we do. Our government is focused on building an economy that works for all Canadians. Canada's economy has the fastest growth in the G7, and our unemployment rate remains low. But we'll keep working hard to make sure that everyone is benefiting from those facts and that our economy remains strong. On va continuer d'investir pour vous et votre famille en rendant la vie plus abordable, en luttant contre les changements climatiques et en gardant nos communautés en sécurité. Et on va continuer de livrer des vrais résultats pour les gens et une économie qui comprend tous les Canadiens. As we get ready to head into the new sitting of Parliament, our caucus is energized and focused. We know there's a lot of work to do, and we're making sure that we get it done. Thank you very much. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On va maintenant passer à la période de questions, 20 minutes of questions, starting with CBC.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Ashley Burke, CBC News. You've waited months to move forward with new measures to address affordability. Your MPs say that all summer they've been hearing what a big issue this is with their constituents and what a concern it is. Why wait until now to move forward on this?
We've been focused on having people's backs through the pandemic and beyond. Yes, we continue to hear from families across the country how things are challenging, but I've also been hearing how reducing childcare fees by 50% for many families across the country, with all provinces due to follow suit this fall, has made a real difference. And this was something we worked on through the spring. The increase in the Canada Child Benefit, which is hundreds of dollars a month for families across the country who need that support tax-free. The increase means it's going up with inflation. Increases to the OAS with inflation. Increase to OAS by 10% for seniors over 75. These are the kinds of things that we've been working on and have delivered over the past months. And now we're pleased to move forward with more targeted measures to help people this fall, because we hear clearly how people need it.
Next question.
Good morning, Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. There's been a lot of pressure for you to act more on inflation, but there's also been a lot of pressure not to do more that will encourage inflation. Why are you convinced that these moves will not just simply make inflation worse?
I think the most important thing is to understand that there are Canadians out there really hurting. Yes, increases in the cost of living and challenges with inflation and disrupted supply chains that are global are affecting everyone. But what we're doing with these specific measures is targeting those most vulnerable, those who are most hard hit by the increases in inflation, by extra support for people who pay an inordinate proportion of their income on rent or housing costs, in direct support for almost half the families in the country who need extra support with a stronger GST rebate, and also moving forward in tangible ways that are going to mean that dental care will be more affordable for families with kids under 12. These are things that will make a difference in people's lives right now, but they are also sufficiently targeted that we are confident that they will not contribute to increased inflation.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Vous dites que vous écoutez les préoccupations des Canadiens. On sent un intérêt renouvelé pour la question de la hausse du coût de la vie. Ma question, est-ce que Pierre Poilievre est en train de dicter votre programme politique?
Ça fait depuis 7 ans qu'on est là pour aider les Canadiens, pour investir dans leur bien-être, pour leur donner les moyens de réussir dans une économie qui est faite pour tout le monde. La première chose qu'on a faite en tant que gouvernement, c'est qu'on a baissé les impôts pour la classe moyenne en les augmentant pour les mieux nantis. Et Pierre Poilievre et les conservateurs ont voté contre ces mesures-là. On a livré une allocation canadienne aux enfants qui donne des centaines de dollars par mois aux familles qui en ont besoin. Et Pierre Poilievre a voté contre ces mesures-là. Depuis 7 ans, on est là pour investir, pour appuyer les Canadiens, pour les aider à passer à travers des moments difficiles. C'est ce qu'on fait depuis des mois avec nos investissements en petite enfance, avec nos augmentations pour l'allocation canadienne aux enfants, avec des investissements pour aider les entrepreneurs et les petites entreprises. Et maintenant, nous avançons avec d'autres mesures qui vont continuer à aider les plus vulnérables. C'est ce qu'on fait depuis les débuts, c'est ce qu'on va continuer à faire.
Mes collègues aimeraient ça vous entendre en anglais là-dessus.
Since day one, this government has been there to support Canadians. The very first thing we did 7 years ago was lower taxes on the middle class by raising them on the wealthiest 1%. Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives voted against that measure. They also voted against the Canada Child Benefit that gives hundreds of dollars a month tax-free to families that need it and continues to rise with the cost of living, as it did again this summer. These are the things that we have consistently stood for as we work hard every single day to build an economy that works for everyone. And with the measures we put forward this spring, whether it's cutting childcare fees in half right across the country, or moving forward with increases to the CCB, or other supports for seniors like raising the OAS by 10% for our eldest seniors. These are things that are making a real difference, and on top of that, we're moving forward today with measures that will make a huge difference in the lives of millions of Canadians. We will continue to have people's backs because that's what Canadians expect of us, and that's what we know Canadians need.
En suivi, j'ai une question pour Mme Freeland. Le Canada est probablement le seul pays du G7 à imposer des sanctions sur les engrais en provenance de la Russie. Ce que j'aimerais savoir, est-ce qu'on a l'intention d'enlever ces tarifs-là? Il y a des agriculteurs à qui ça fait très, très mal, puis ça peut aussi contribuer à augmenter le prix des aliments, justement. Est-ce que vous êtes en train de reconsidérer cette décision-là?
Je vais demander à Mme Freeland de répondre, mais je vais juste souligner qu'on comprend à quel point les coûts de production, les coûts pour nos agriculteurs à travers le pays ont augmenté. C'est une réalité à travers le monde et nous allons être là avec des mesures pour les aider. Mais je vais passer à Christian pour répondre à ça.
Je m'excuse. OK, merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Premièrement, je pense que c'est important de souligner que le Canada a pris le leadership dans notre sanction contre la Russie. Le Canada était le premier pays du G7 de comprendre la réalité. Et c'est que, en ce qui concerne le commerce international, la Russie mérite d'être dans la même catégorie du Corée du Nord. Et en comprenant ça, on a à mettre en place un régime du commerce international, le même qu'on a avec la Corée du Nord. On n'a pas maintenant avec la Russie le statut que tous les autres pays du monde ont. Et en faisant ça, le Canada a prendre le leadership pour tout le monde. Et je pense que tous les Canadiens sont pour un régime des fortes sanctions contre la Russie, surtout maintenant. Deuxièmement, oui, notre régime de sanctions a des conséquences pour les Canadiens. Mais nous devons comprendre que si on regarde par exemple nos alliés en Europe, les conséquences pour les Européens sont beaucoup, beaucoup, beaucoup plus graves que les conséquences pour le Canada. Et je pense que quand on parle avec nos alliés en ce qui concerne les sanctions contre la Russie, on doit aussi être prêt à prendre une position ferme. Troisièmement, comme le Premier ministre a dit, pour nous, les producteurs agricoles sont en priorité. Nous comprenons qu'ils sont très importants pour l'économie canadienne et ce est pour tout le monde, surtout aujourd'hui quand il y a un grand besoin des produits de notre producteur agricole. Alors, on est toujours prêt à regarder les enjeux spécifiques, les mesures spécifiques qu'on peut prendre pour aider les producteurs agricoles. Merci.
Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. Prime Minister, what's the size and makeup of the Canadian delegation traveling to London for the Queen's funeral? Will you be inviting opposition leaders like Pierre Poilievre? And on the 19th, will Canadians have a national holiday to mourn the Queen?
Discussions continue to be ongoing across government and with the UK government and the folks in charge. We have already engaged closely with all opposition leaders' offices around the plans as we are knowing them. We are working out the final delegation, which will become known in the coming days. We have also chosen to move forward with a federal holiday on Monday. We will be working with the provinces and the territories to try and see that we're aligned on this. There are still a few details to be worked out, but declaring an opportunity for Canadians to mourn on Monday is going to be important. So for our part, we will be letting federal employees know that Monday will be a day of mourning where they will not work.
En français.
Pour la taille et les détails de la délégation qu'on va amener à Londres, ces détails sont en train d'être fignolés, mais je peux vous assurer qu'on est en conversation avec tous les chefs des partis d'opposition pour voir quel rôle tout le monde peut avoir pour démontrer la solennité et l'importance du moment pour le pays. Et je peux vous informer que nous allions déclarer un jour férié fédéral. Lundi, on est en train de travailler avec les provinces et les territoires par rapport à leur perspective là-dessus. Chaque province va prendre ses décisions, mais nous annonçons que les employés du gouvernement fédéral vont avoir un congé pour pouvoir faire une journée de deuil pour Sa Majesté la Reine.
Next question.
Alex Ballingal, Toronto Star. Just in the wake of the Queen's death, do you expect or welcome Canadians grappling with the question of the future of the monarchy in Canada? And can you explain where you stand on that and why?
I think Canadians are rightly proud of living in one of the strongest democracies in the world. Our institutions are healthy, our debates and conversations are robust, and we have an enviable stability despite an extraordinary diversity of backgrounds, of origins, of beliefs, of perspectives across the country. And that's something we can never take for granted, so we're always open to conversations about protecting and strengthening our democracy and its institutions, particularly at a time where we see them under assault from various quarters. My own perspective is that Canadians are almost entirely preoccupied with the big issues we're facing, whether it's rises in the cost of living, global inflation, war in Ukraine, challenges around positioning our economy and our jobs to succeed in a carbon-neutral world, in a world in which we're fighting climate change. These are the things that Canadians are talking to me about, community safety, opportunity for their kids, good jobs into the future. That's the focus that we will continue to have as a government.
Next question.
Hi, Bill Curry from the Globe and Mail. Yesterday in your speech to caucus, you said now is not the time for politicians to exploit fears and to pit people one against the other. Your critics have really jumped on that, saying that it's hypocritical on your part because some of your policies on vaccination and some of the language that you've used in recent months, and including during the election campaign, contributed to a lot of this divisiveness that we see as a society. So how do you respond to critics saying that you're being hypocritical when you say don't pit Canadians one against the other?
I think it's very clear that job one of any government is keeping Canadians safe. And those are the decisions we took during the pandemic to ensure that Canadians stayed safe. And no government is ever going to get unanimous consent on every important measure it puts forward. But we put the safety of Canadians and the economic recovery that we're experiencing right now at the center of every decision we took during the pandemic. And if it is divisive to point out that vaccines have saved millions, billions of lives, the vaccines are safe and the best way through this pandemic, which we've perhaps ended the acute phase, but it will continue in various forms, and we need to continue to stay vigilant. If people are calling a respect for science and an upholding and defense of facts divisive, but then perhaps people need to take a careful look at those who are saying that.
Next question.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Still on Poilievre, you spoke yesterday about leadership that's not responsible, but you can't ignore that his messaging, his communication, especially around inflation, is resonating with a lot of Canadians. How do you work to counter that with your messaging?
Well, one of the things that we've demonstrated over the past years is a willingness to work with all parliamentarians, to draw on good ideas as they're brought forward on ways we can help Canadians, on ways we can grow the economy. That's the kind of collaboration that Canadians saw across different orders of government through the pandemic, as we all worked together from different perspectives to try and deliver, as opposition parties worked with the government to deliver the kinds of things that we're going to make happen and help Canadians. And we weren't overly fussed about who was getting credit for what. Canadians wanted to see us delivering. And we are fully open to suggestions and ideas about how to continue to do even better to support Canadians. That's what Canadians expect of their government and of their parliamentarians. But by the same token, I won't hesitate to call out economically irresponsible or questionable ideas like telling people to invest in Bitcoin, which if they had listened to him, people would have lost half their savings. These are the kinds of solutions, supposed solutions, that deserve deeper scrutiny. And in a responsible parliament, we need to be calling out ideas that are going to harm Canadians more than they actually help.
Next question.
Vicky Hogarth, CHCO News here in St. Andrews. Canadian banks are protected from foreign competition, but Canadians in remote but prosperous locations like Graminan Island in New Brunswick aren't protected from their banks closing down. Why protect the banks but not offer Canadians a reciprocal protection to be served? And are you worried about how bank closures will affect population growth in rural Canada?
Canada has one of the most stable banking systems in the entire world. When the 2008 banking crisis came and went, Canadian banks stood strong and Canadians did better because of the structures, the institutions, and the frameworks that we created around Canadian banks. Canadians who have their savings in Canadians banks are protected because of that, and that's really something that we take very seriously as a government. For further comment, I'm happy to turn to our finance minister to address that issue more directly. Christia.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm just going to add one thing to what the Prime Minister said and then speak to the specific point. You know, right now we are in a very challenging, very volatile global economic environment. as we were in 2008. And the fact that Canada has a very well, I would even say, strictly regulated banking sector with high reserve requirements and pretty tough mortgage rules is something that Canadians today should be taking a lot of comfort from. We have a system that is very stress tested, and as the global economy is going through a lot of stress, it's like, here we are on a wharf, it's like a big life jacket for Canadians. Now, the issue of having actual bank branches in rural communities, and particularly right now in Atlantic Canada, is one that our government is very aware of. We have been having some conversations with banks about it and some conversations with rural communities. And, we're committed to continuing to listen to Canadians about that. Thanks.
Next question.
Andrew Ward, Brunswick News. Prime Minister, we had a bit of a disturbing story a couple of days ago here in New Brunswick. A 26-year-old woman, a sexual assault survivor, went into the hospital and could not get treated, was told there was nobody qualified to do that. I'd like you to speak to that first of all, that you're aware of it, and second of all, in the context of what's happening in Canada's healthcare system. Obviously, things are not good right now.
No, I heard of that story, and it's horrific. It's unacceptable that a survivor be faced with that kind of response. We know how challenging it is in some cases to deal with institutions, whether it's hospitals or police, after that kind of violence. And my heart goes out to her and to the entire community that's supporting her. Obviously, every Canadian knows that our healthcare system is under tremendous stress right across the country. The federal government was there during the pandemic with billions of dollars more, about $72 billion extra for healthcare across the country. And we've made a strong commitment to make sure that everyone knows we will be there for more investments in healthcare. But I think everyone knows that it's not just about more money into the system, it's about getting better outcomes. It's about getting more support for those frontline workers, nurses and doctors and folks in our hospitals who are increasingly ground down, increasingly exhausted, increasingly overworked, that we need to give them more resources and better conditions in which to work. That is what we are very much engaged with, working in the provinces, not because the federal government should be dictating conditions of work or allocation of resources, but because we need to be clear that Canadians deserve a system that works better than it works right now, and that money will be part of the solution, but not the only solution. So I'm looking forward to continuing the great conversations that all of us are having with premiers across the country, particularly our Health Minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, accompanied by Chrystia Freeland, and Dominic LeBlanc, our Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. This is something we take incredibly seriously. As difficult as that story was to hear yesterday, we know that there are stories like it happening all across the country of people not getting the service and the support that they so deeply need from people who would like to be giving it but are stressed and stretched too thin in our medical systems across the country.
We'll take one last question.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Parry, CBC. You confirmed to your cabinet last week that you plan to lead your party into the next election. You've said it before, but I'm just wondering if Pierre Poilievre's rise in the Conservative leadership race, if that cemented your decision in any way. I'd like to ask you as well, if your deal with the NDP lasts until 2025, you'll have been in office for almost a decade. Do you think by then there'll be voter fatigue, that people will be more apt to see Pierre Poilievre as a viable alternative to your government?
I think what Canadians want is to not have to think about politics and politicians all that much. Canadians want to see a country that is delivering for them the kinds of jobs and opportunities that they want. Canadians want to see strong, safe communities. Canadians want to know that there's a plan that recognizes the challenges in the world and has real solutions to put forward to them, whether it's moving forward to a net zero economy where Canada can be a reliable energy supplier with good jobs in Canada and a positive impact around the world. whether it's moving forward to make sure that we're truly building an economy that works for everyone, that recognizes the only way to grow a strong economy is to bring everyone into it. Now, unfortunately, we see conservatives are still stuck in the kind of thinking that we defeated back in 2015, that believes that the best way to grow the economy is to give the wealthiest and most successful tax breaks and advantages so they can continue to generate wealth and not worry about who actually that wealth trickles down to, if it even does. We've put forward a vision for a strong and growing economy, and we've delivered on that in so many ways. We lifted 1 million people out of poverty at the same time as we created record numbers of jobs. We're moving forward as world leaders in the fight against climate change, and we're seeing how that is paying off with investors, partnerships with countries like Germany that see the direction we're going. Now, the Conservative Party is focused on bringing us backwards to some idealized time that never existed and certainly won't ever exist again. We are focused on looking at where the world is going and positioning Canada to be there. So over the next 3 years, we're going to be working as a team totally focused on Canadians, on delivering the kinds of services that Canadians need and the kind of vision and plan that's going to bring them into a future where they can see themselves and be confident about where the world's going and where Canada's role is in that. I'm excited, not about the political context, but about the opportunity to continue to deliver for Canadians in very real ways from coast to coast to coast.
How much did Mr. Poilievre's rise influence your decision to stay on and fight?
I think we're seeing a rise of various forms of populism based on anger and misinformation and disinformation all around the world in many democracies. I've had many conversations with my fellow leaders at the G7 and in other contexts around the pressures that democracies are facing. Some external pressures, like the pressures put on us by countries like Russia or China or others. Many of them internal, with people who are frustrated, scared about where the world's going, worried about their place within it. And politicians face a very simple choice. Do you allay those fears and empower people and show them how we're going to build a better future? Or do you amplify those fears for short-term political gain? It's the kind of conversations we had in the 2015 election, and it looks like it might be the kinds of conversations we're going to have again, with the Conservatives choosing a path of amplification of anger and misinformation instead of actually figuring out how to respond to the real threat of climate change, how to respond to the real threat of making sure everyone is included in the economic growth we're creating. That's the discussion that not just politicians but all Canadians are going to be engaged in over the coming years, and I, for one, am very excited about being able to lead those conversations with this great team behind me.
Merci.
Okay. Je pense qu'on est en train de voir un peu à travers le monde une montée d'un populisme, de peur, de division, de désinformation. Et ce qu'on sait, c'est que c'est une piste un peu facile d'amplifier la frustration et la peur des citoyens pour des buts politiques à court terme. Mais ce n'est pas la piste responsable, pas pour un pays comme le Canada, où nous avons besoin, oui, de reconnaître les défis et les anxiétés des gens, mais il faut leur donner confiance dans l'avenir qu'on est en train de bâtir, l'avenir qui nous entoure, qui nous vient de tous les coins du monde, que ce soit la lutte contre les changements climatiques et le développement d'une économie qui va profiter des innovations et du travail des Canadiens dans ce sens-là, qui va être là pour reconnaître qu'une économie n'est réellement forte que si tout le monde a une chance d'y participer et de s'épanouir. Alors, cette conversation sur est-ce qu'on est confiant face à l'avenir, Est-ce qu'on continue de travailler ensemble de façon ambitieuse pour s'assurer qu'on réussisse tous dans les années à venir malgré les défis et qu'on mette de l'avant un plan concret pour le faire, versus un parti qui, jusqu'à présent, est satisfait d'amplifier les frustrations et la peur sans offrir de solutions concrètes sur comment on va être prêt pour les défis qui viendront dans les années, les décennies à venir, quel que soit le gouvernement.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde. Bonne journée.